there's an airplane going over my house. There's always an airplane going over my house, but I always wonder if you can hear it. Probably not, especially not once I get my, theme music going, because I have theme music. Brought to you by Amy Moran, one of the coolest people I know. So, it's been a week with things that are other people's business. But here in my home, we've had just some things go sideways. Like, I'm supposed to have these really amazing shelves put up over there, and I'm supposed to be turned so that you can see the shelves behind me. That was like the thing I wanted for this video, just to see how they would look, so I could have a background, a nice new background, and also shelves in my room. But that has not happened because of all the things that have been going on with like my roommate's car, and mostly that, because it's a 2-person job. It says, everybody who reviewed the shelves said, you can do it yourself. It'll take a really long time and be incredibly frustrating. And I can't really like lean over because it creates pressure in my head and gives me migraines. So that's just not gonna happen. So it really does need 2 people. And so she's tapped out for this so far this week. And like we've got like a thing getting done for the house. And so if you are so inclined, feel free to like buy a book using one of my referral links, because I could really use it. Or buy one of my books. My books are, great. And they are primarily written by Kevin Patterson, and I came in originally as an editor. Not even like an editor, kind of like a friend who like sort of is a librarian and knows books and likes books and knows how like books are structured. Kev started as a nonfiction writer, has an amazing nonfiction book called Love's Not Colorblind, and he had written like this fiction fun project during the process of writing Love's Not Colorblind, which is a heavier book dealing with race and representation and polyamory and other alternative communities. And so he was like, take a look at it. And I was like, There were some things about it. I had notes, just even from the first couple pages. And he was like, oh, I'm not ready for notes. Like, I'm getting notes on my other book. I don't, like, my heart can't take more notes. And I was like, that's fine. And so he came back to me after, I don't know if the tour had like sort of, I don't know if he was like right before he toured or something, like after the book had gone to like final edits and print and stuff. So like I think in between, he was like, let's look at it again. And we started talking about it. And we like got to the point where I would say something like, well, what about this? Where does this come from or whatever? And he was like, oh yeah, like what about this? And I'm like, no, what about this? And he goes, oh, write it. And so suddenly I was like a co-author on this like superhero series. Anyway, so yeah, buy those books. That makes me more money than like, $1 in kickbacks from referrals. Because I'm working on my own books, one with Kev, a nonfiction book, and a memoir that I've been working on for a lot longer than I thought it was going to take me, because, wow, not only does my health sort of get in the way, some days I can't write because I can't get my thoughts together that kind of way, but it's been a lot more of an emotional process. And I think that the final product is going to be a lot lighter than the process has been. But, yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because I'm really only here to talk about one book, although I'm going to talk about 2 because the other one was really interesting. I wanted to talk about this book, not just the content of it, but sort of through the eyes of me as a reviewer. And the reason that I want to do that is because it took me 11 days to read this book. And usually you can kind of look at that and go, oh my God, it took her 11 days to read that book. She usually reads books in like a couple hours. Must be a bad book. Now, I disagree with this. I enjoyed the book. It did take me 11 days to read it though. And I want to talk about why and why reviews are so subjective. And it doesn't mean that they're not helpful. In fact, they can be incredibly helpful. But why they end up being so subjective and how this book ended up being a 4-star read for me and an 11-day read for me, and how those two things can coexist. Because it's true, I do read books, generally speaking, in a day to 3 days, depending on what I have going on. So the book is the second book in a duology. And now that I have a recorder on, I'm going to completely blank on the book names because they are not the same. Like, they don't have that same, like, you know, a blank, 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 blank trend that has been going on. But it is similar. It's the Book of Tea duology. The first book actually came out, I think, earlier this year even. I don't even think it came out at the end of last year. And so this book just came out yesterday, actually, when I'm recording this. And I really wanted to get this done sooner, but everything that's been going on. And I did not want to give you the me of 2 days ago when everything was way more stressful. So the first book, loved it. Just loved every page of it. It is so cool. It I was gonna say the title, and then I started doing that thing in my brain where I start tumbling the titles together, and once again I'm afraid that I'm gonna jumble the two of them. So you know what, I'm just gonna do the smart thing. I'm gonna stop, I'm gonna look at them one more time. Okay, the first book is A Magic Steeped in Poison, and the second one is A Venom Dark and Sweet. I don't know. I think it's like 3 a.m. and I really want to go to bed early for me. Early. Because we have workers coming tomorrow and it's going to be a whole mess because they have so much to do and I have to sleep through them. Anyway, so I'm just going to go with Magic for the first book and Venom for the second one. I hope you don't mind. Anyway, so the first book, so cool. It's basically structured around this competition, and the magic system is so neat. It revolves around tea ceremonies, and like, it's cool. It's really cool, and it's got this it's, you know, it's structured as a competition. So the second book is not, right? It's all the fallout. Okay, so let's talk about like me personally and some of the struggles that I've been having since the pandemic started, and like all the stress of that has kind of changed how I read and some of the struggles that I'm having with reading, which I talk about all the time. And I talk about them all the time because I want people to understand that like it's totally normal. Even the most avid reader can have them. But I want to talk about how these two things have come together and have made it really difficult for me to get this book done quickly. Okay, the first part is it was a duology. So I've lost the momentum. I had sort of forgotten a couple of the characters. Not really, like they all came back to me, but I had to sort of get that all back. Oh, who's this one? Right. Who's this? Right. Who's this? Right. So my investment had dropped in a way that probably wouldn't have happened before. It wouldn't have happened before I got sick, which has nothing to do with the pandemic, but my migraines and my memory, and I'm also like older now, and I also read a ton, so like I have a lot of space between these books, so that's a problem for me. So that's one, is that I've lost a little bit of investment. I've lost a little bit of who's who. So I've got to catch up. I've got to bring myself back to all this. Two, it's a multiple point of view book. I've been struggling with that. Three, it has very short chapters. This is the other thing I've been struggling with, and they're the same problem basically. Is that every time I feel there's a natural break in the book, I have needed, since the pandemic started and I've been struggling to read in larger chunks, I've been losing flow and I need like a reset every single time. So like basically every time there's a chapter or point of view change or both, I need to go and like do something. So I'm like chapter Sudoku, because Sudoku is like the fastest way for me to feel like I've just cleared my mind and then can go right to the book. I have created this. I'm not sure that it's like not a problem on its own, right? Because I don't know that I'm not creating a habit. But still, here we are. Okay, so that covers those two issues, the multiple points of view and, that. And then the other is the first book was like, structured around this whole thing. And this is all political fallout, which is fine, but like, it's a totally different style of book. So, political stuff is not generally my jam. So this book should, by all rights, like not be like for me right now. However, I was not going to put that book down. I don't want to. And the worst part of it is I got it through NetGalley, right? So like they don't allow you to like not rate the book. So, I mean, you can decline to give feedback, which really sucks. I can't just be like, I would love to get into this book, but like, I've got some, pandemic reading issues that make this fascinating world just not for me right now. I actually felt this way about, there was a book that came out. It's Mark Oshiro, I guess. Is that who that is? Each of Us a Desert, I believe was the name. And it was, I think that's, like, it had like a slower pace or something. And it was right when I was starting to feel like it was hard to read like 5 sentences in a row. It was just too much for me. Like my brain was processing like, what's gonna happen next? Are we all going to like, is this pandemic gonna come and like destroy us all? I had no idea. And I just, having been someone who had been like, had her life limited by health issues, and suddenly finding out there was like a whole new health issue that everybody was gonna get, I was going through a lot of feelings. And yeah, there were things going on. It just, like, in my brain. Like, my brain was, like, rewriting itself. And there were books that I didn't want. Like, I wanted to say, let me come back to it. And either you decline and you write something. And I wanted to write something. I wanted to say, this book just isn't for me right now. But I can't do that without giving it stars. That's not fair. Anyway, so I'm reading this book. I'm enjoying it, but I need to put it down all the time because it's changing points of view almost every single chapter. The chapters are really short. And the other thing is that like the action part of it doesn't really even come into play until like 50% or so of the book, which is fine. Like I would... Like, when I think about how the book is structured, I don't think that she could have done anything else because I wouldn't have felt like the characters were apart. Like, the only thing she could have done was stuck the duology and turned it into one book and had a time jump. And I don't feel like that would have felt right, nor would it have given her the time to write the second part of the book. Now, I do feel like if I'm going to criticize the book at all, at the end, there is a very like speed up, slow down feeling. So like when the climax happened, I was like, oh, we're done. Like, that's it. That's my one problem with the whole book, was that like I wasn't quite sure like what was going on. But like there were so many interesting things that were going on, like in terms of like this book really made me think. And I don't know if that was because I was taking time in between the chapters to pause. Like I was thinking about things like agency based stories. Like we have very agency based stories. You know, it's the hero's journey. It's not like the vessel of the gods kind of a thing, right? And has been for a very long time. Like I was talking to my roommate about this a little bit, and we talked about Buffy, you know, and how the entirety of Buffy is screw prophecy. Oh, I'm so sorry about my nails. I know some people get really twitched about nails, but I meant to take the polish off. It's been coming off on its own for like a day. I've had this for like 4 days. This is how nail polish treats me. And yeah, that was multiple coats and whatever. But anyway, so we're talking about like destiny and, you know, thinking about like just how characters are in terms of like what they do and what they have to choose, and how this book is very interesting because it's less about choice and it's much more about duty. And that's really, really different from every story that has been crammed down our throats for a really long time about like standing up against all of these things instead of doing for your community. Like, Katniss wasn't doing for her community. She was doing for her sister and then got wrapped up in doing for her community. Right? You know what I mean? Like, not that that's always true, but like I just feel like, you know, we talk all the time now about found family and how important it is. And it has been so important because it is about getting away usually from toxicity or isolation. But, and I've said this before, found family isn't community necessarily. And we don't talk about that enough. Anyway, so I really did enjoy this book, even though if you're on my Goodreads and you saw that it took me 11 days, you might think otherwise. And I did have someone say to me, a friend of mine was like, I noticed your updates. And I was like, no, I am enjoying the book. Don't think that I'm not. And I did enjoy the book. It did take me like a really long time to read something else this past week too. So it could just be where my brain was, because I was reading, again, this was like also really short works. I was reading, I forget what it's called, but it's a horror like zine or something. And then they put the first couple issues together as like a trade. Some great things, some mostly like it was never, I don't think there was anything in there that I thought was bad. But also I read graphic novels, like, and most of this was illustrated and right before bed. I read a lot of horror graphic novels right before bed. It's very ridiculous of me. So speaking of which, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is this book by Andy Watson called The Book Tour. This is another choice of what I was going to like. I'm going to knock this out before I go to sleep because it is a graphic novel. It'll be easy. It was not easy. So the description and all of the reviews kept saying Kafka-esque. I haven't read a ton of Kafka, but it's not something that you should read before bed. Like I'm starting it, like the art feels very like classic cartoony. The main character feels very old school, absent-minded writer. He's like somewhere between like comic goof, like the guy who like makes all the silly mistakes and you're just like, oh, you silly man, and like a guy who life is just a little sad and kind of pathetic. And then as things go on, they're just getting worse. But he's still him, and he's still, like, things are still funny. Not funny, haha. Funny, sad. And then at the end of the book, you're just like, you didn't do the thing. Anyway, it was not what I was expecting, and I was... So I spent a chunk of the day talking to my roommate and my ex, telling them about it, and then we all were like trying to figure out some stuff about it. And you should totally read it because it was really interesting. I really liked how old school it felt. Like, I really felt like I was reading something that I could have like picked up at my grandparents' house. Like one of those random books that your grandparents have around and you're just like, what is this? And then you pick it up and you're like, oh, this is funny. And maybe like you're too young to know that it's like actually really not funny at all. And then when you're older, you're like, oh God. So the book tour. Also, if you get to the end and you have like a theory, just tell me it. Absolutely tell me it. I had a glass of tea to bring onto this video. It was iced tea because it's hot. It's really hot. Like you can see that my hair is like drying and wanting to curl. But since it's dyed, it can't curl as much as it usually would in the summer. But then I drank it with dinner. And then I was like, do I want more tea? It's decaf. But do I want more tea if I really need to get to bed tonight, like early? I have to like wrangle the cats and hide them.